Ethan sat in the far corner of the school cafeteria, his tray untouched. At 17, he already knew what it felt like to be invisible. Except, in his case, he wasn't invisible to everyone, just to the people who mattered. To others, he was very visible, but only as the butt of cruel jokes. The whispers always started the moment he walked into a room. "Here comes Ethan, the human bulldozer," someone sneered, loud enough for him to hear. The words stung, but he'd grown used to it. What hurt more were the laughs that followed. Ethan kept his head down, gripping his lunch tray tightly as he shuffled to his usual spot, far away from the crowd. Despite the daily torment, Ethan had a gentle heart. He wasn't bitter, and he didn't lash out. He simply endured. The one thing that made the pain bearable was Olivia, the school's queen bee. She was the epitome of high school perfection: golden hair that caught the sunlight, a smile that could light up the darkest room, and a laugh that, at least to Ethan, sounded like music. To Ethan, Olivia wasn't just beautiful, she was kind, or so he thought. She had once smiled at him in the hallway, and he'd held on to that moment like a lifeline. Maybe she's different, he often told himself. Maybe she's not like the others. So when Olivia approached him in chemistry class one afternoon and struck up a conversation, Ethan's heart raced. "Hey, Ethan," she said, her voice light and sweet. "Are you going to my party this Friday?" Ethan froze. Was this real? Olivia was talking to him, inviting him to her party. I didn't know about it," he stammered, his cheeks burning. "Well, now you do," she said with a wink. "You should come. It's going to be fun." Ethan spent the rest of the week floating on air. For the first time in years, he felt noticed, seen. He wanted to make a good impression, so he went all out. He rented a suit, borrowed a luxury car from his uncle, and even scraped together his savings to buy Olivia a gift. "This is it," he told himself in the mirror before leaving for the party. "This is your chance." The party was in full swing when Ethan arrived. Olivia's house was packed with students, the music loud and the energy infectious. Ethan felt a mix of nerves and excitement as he stepped inside, clutching the neatly wrapped gift he'd bought. He spotted Olivia across the room, surrounded by her friends. She looked even more stunning than he'd imagined. Summoning his courage, he walked over and handed her the gift. "This is for you," he said, his voice trembling slightly. Olivia smiled, taking the box from him. "Wow, Ethan, this is so sweet," she said, loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. Ethan's chest swelled with pride, but then her smile twisted into something else, something cruel. "Hey, everyone," Olivia called out, holding up the gift. "Guess what? I won the bet." The room fell silent, and Ethan felt the air leave his lungs. "What? What bet?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. Olivia smirked, her eyes glinting with malice. "The bet that I could get the ugliest guy in school to show up at my party. And you did. Thanks for proving me right, Ethan." Laughter erupted around him. It was deafening, drowning out everything else. Ethan stood frozen, his face burning with humiliation. He looked around the room, hoping, praying that someone would come to his defense, but no one did. As the laughter grew louder, Ethan dropped the gift and bolted for the door. Tears blurred his vision as he ran into the night, his heart shattering with every step. In that moment, Ethan made a silent vow. "I'll never let them make me feel this way again," he whispered to himself. Never. Ethan sat alone in his room, the curtains drawn tight to block out the sunlight. His phone buzzed relentlessly on the desk, but he couldn't bring himself to pick it up. He already knew what awaited him. Cruel comments, mocking memes, and videos of his humiliation at Olivia's party. He had made the mistake of checking once, just after he got home that night. The video, titled "Ugliest Guy at School Gets Played," had already gone viral among his classmates. The captions were ruthless, and the comments were even worse. Can't believe he thought she actually liked him. This is gold. Someone give Olivia an Oscar. He deserves it for showing up like that. Ethan threw his phone across the room, where it hit the wall with a dull thud. and fell to the floor. The tears came again, hot and relentless, but this time they weren't just tears of pain. They were tears of anger. Over the next week, Ethan shut himself off from the world. He didn't go to school, ignoring the concerned messages from his few friends. He didn't eat much, the thought of food turning his stomach. His parents grew worried, but Ethan shrugged off their questions with half-hearted excuses. "Just feeling sick," he'd mutter, avoiding their eyes. Inside, he was drowning. The laughter from the party echoed in his mind every night, haunting him like a cruel ghost. When he closed his eyes, he saw Olivia's smirk, the glint of malice in her eyes as she delivered the final blow. The final straw came when Ethan's older brother, Jake, tried to intervene. Jake was everything Ethan wasn't: confident, athletic, and popular. He barged into Ethan's room one evening, frustration written all over his face. "Enough of this, Ethan," Jake snapped. "You can't just hide in here forever. So what if some kids were mean? Grow up and move on." Ethan glared at his brother, his fists clenching. "You don't get it," he said through gritted teeth. "You've never been the joke. You've never been humiliated in front of the entire school." Jake sighed, his tone softening. "You're right, I don't get it. But hiding isn't going to fix anything. You need to figure out how to fight back, Ethan. Not with fists, but with your life. Show them you're more than what they think you are." His brother's words stuck with him, even as he turned away and sank back into his bed. But what could he do? How could he possibly rise above this when the entire school and half the internet was laughing at him? One night, as Ethan flipped aimlessly through TV channels, he stumbled upon a WWE match. The crowd roared as the camera panned to a wrestler standing in the ring, his arms raised in victory. The announcers were talking about his story, a man who had grown up bullied, rejected, and told he'd never amount to anything. Ethan sat up, his interest piqued. The wrestler spoke in an interview clip, his voice strong and steady. "They told me I'd never make it," the wrestler said. "They called me weak, useless. But I used every insult as fuel. I turned their hate into my strength. And now I'm here, proving them all wrong." Ethan felt a spark ignite in his chest, something he hadn't felt in weeks. He rewound the clip and played it again, and then again, letting the wrestler's words sink in. "That's what I need to do," Ethan whispered to himself. "I need to stop running and start fighting." The next morning, for the first time in weeks, Ethan got out of bed with purpose. He searched online for local gyms, reading reviews and looking at photos. When he found one that specialized in wrestling training, he clicked on it without hesitation. It wasn't going to be easy. He knew that. But for the first time, he felt a glimmer of hope. Ethan stood in front of the mirror, staring at his reflection. He still saw the same overweight, awkward boy he'd been all his life. But he also saw something else, a fire in his eyes that hadn't been there before. "This is just the beginning," he told himself. "They haven't seen the last of me." Ethan stood outside the gym, the cold wind biting through his jacket. The building was old and unassuming, with faded lettering on the sign that read, "Iron Haven Wrestling Academy." He took a deep breath, his heart pounding in his chest. "Here we go," he whispered to himself as he pushed open the door. Inside, the gym was alive with the sounds of effort, weights clanging, people grunting as they lifted, and the rhythmic thud of fists hitting punching bags. The air smelled of sweat and determination, and Ethan felt a mix of intimidation and excitement. "Can I help you?" a gruff voice called out. Ethan turned to see a muscular man in his 40s, his arms crossed over his chest. His face was weathered, with a scar running down one cheek, and his eyes were sharp and piercing. I want to train," Ethan stammered. The man raised an eyebrow. "Train for what? Weightlifting? Boxing? Or are you just here to lose some pounds?""Wrestling," Ethan said, his voice steady. "I want to become a wrestler." The man studied him for a long moment, then smirked. "You've got a long way to go, kid. Wrestling isn't just about looking strong. It's about being strong. Physically, mentally, emotionally. You think you've got what it takes?" Ethan nodded, his resolve firm. "I'll do whatever it takes." The man, who introduced himself as Coach Rick, handed Ethan a waiver to sign and pointed him toward the locker room. "Get changed. You start today." For the next few hours, Ethan was put through the most grueling workout of his life. Rick had him running laps, lifting weights, and performing drills that left his muscles screaming. Ethan stumbled more than once, and by the end of the session, he collapsed onto the mat, drenched in sweat and gasping for air. Rick stood over him, his arms crossed. "Not bad for your first day," he said. "But if you're serious about this, you'll be back tomorrow. Same time, same intensity." Ethan nodded, too exhausted to speak. The days turned into weeks, and Ethan stuck to his promise. He showed up at the gym every day, pushing himself harder than he ever thought possible. His muscles ached constantly, and there were moments when he wanted to quit, but he forced himself to keep going. "Pain is progress," Rick would say whenever Ethan looked like he was about to give up. Ethan also overhauled his diet, trading in fast food and soda for grilled chicken, vegetables, and protein shakes. It wasn't easy. He craved the comfort of his old eating habits, but he reminded himself why he was doing this. "This is for me," he'd whisper to himself every morning as he laced up his sneakers. "Not for them. For me." One evening, after an especially tough training session, Ethan stayed behind to catch his breath. The gym was nearly empty, save for Rick, who was watching him from the corner. "You've got heart, kid," Rick said, walking over. "Most people would have quit by now, but you remind me of someone." "Who?" Ethan asked, wiping sweat from his forehead. "Me," Rick said with a small smile. "Back when I was your age." Rick sat down beside Ethan and began to share his story. He had been a professional wrestler in his prime, known for his strength and resilience, but a career-ending injury had forced him to retire early, and he'd turned to coaching instead. "I've seen a lot of people come through this gym," Rick said. "Some were naturally talented but lazy. Others worked hard but didn't have the spark. You, though, you've got that fire in your eyes. That's something you can't teach." Ethan felt a surge of pride but remained humble. "Thank you, coach," he said. Rick clapped him on the shoulder. "Keep this up, and I'll start training you professionally. You've got the potential to make it big, kid. Don't waste it." With Rick's guidance, Ethan's progress skyrocketed. His body transformed, shedding fat and building muscle. His confidence grew too, not just because of how he looked, but because of what he was accomplishing. For the first time in his life, Ethan felt strong, not just physically, but mentally and emotionally. He was no longer the boy who ran out of a party in tears. He was becoming someone new, someone unstoppable. By the end of the chapter, Ethan stands in front of the mirror, flexing his newly toned arms. The reflection staring back at him is almost unrecognizable. "This is just the beginning," he says to himself, a determined smile on his face. Ethan's transformation has begun, and he's ready to take on whatever challenges lie ahead. 2 years later, Ethan stood backstage at a regional wrestling event, pulling on his gear and lacing up his boots. The once shy boy had transformed into a powerhouse, both in physique and in confidence. He adjusted the wristbands on his forearms and glanced at himself in the mirror. The sight still surprised him. A lean, muscular man stared back, his face sharp and determined. "Ethan, the Iron Titan Reed," he muttered under his breath, a small smile tugging at his lips. It was his stage name, one he'd earned after months of hard work and dedication. The arena beyond the curtain buzzed with energy, the crowd roaring as the announcer hyped up the next match. This was his moment. It wasn't the WWE yet, But it was a start. Ethan's first big match. Ethan stepped into the ring, the bright lights and deafening cheers flooding his senses. His opponent was a seasoned wrestler known as the Crusher, a man twice Ethan's size with a reputation for demolishing rookies. As the bell rang, Ethan's heart raced, but he remembered Rick's words. Stay focused. Use your speed. Use your mind. The match was grueling. Ethan took blow after blow, his body aching with every hit. But he didn't give up. With every fall, he got back up, his determination fueling him. Then, in a stunning turn, Ethan executed a flawless suplex, flipping the Crusher onto the mat. The crowd erupted as Ethan climbed to the top rope, leaping off with a perfectly executed elbow drop. 1, 2, 3, the referee shouted, slamming his hand on the mat. The match was over. Ethan had won. The crowd chanted his name as he raised his arms in victory. For the first time, Ethan felt like he truly belonged in the ring. The journey to WWE. Over the next year, Ethan climbed the ranks of regional wrestling. His matches became the talk of the circuit, and his name began to spread. Scouts from bigger promotions started attending his matches, and soon Ethan was offered a contract with the WWE. Signing that contract felt surreal. Ethan had spent countless nights dreaming of this moment, and now it was real. His first WWE match was set to air on live television, a milestone that felt like the culmination of all his hard work. Ethan's transformation wasn't just physical. He carried himself with a quiet confidence that commanded respect. Fans adored him not just for his skills but for his underdog story. Ethan often shared his journey in interviews, emphasizing the importance of resilience and self-belief. Everyone faces challenges, he told a reporter. It's not about avoiding pain, it's about using it to fuel your growth. One afternoon, while Ethan was signing autographs at a fan event, he received a surprising email and invitation to his high school reunion. His heart skipped a beat as memories flooded back Olivia, the prank, the laughter. Ethan hadn't set foot in his hometown since he'd left for training. Part of him wanted to ignore the invitation, but another part, stronger now, felt a pull to return. It's time to face the past, Ethan said to himself. Ethan discussed the invitation with Rick, who gave him a knowing look. You've come a long way, kid, Rick said. This could be your chance to show them what you're made of, not just in the ring, but in life. Ethan nodded. He wasn't going to the reunion for revenge. He was going to prove to himself that he'd moved beyond the pain. As the chapter ends, Ethan walks out of the gym, the invitation in his pocket and a determined look on his face. The high school reunion would be a defining moment, not just for Ethan but for everyone who had underestimated him. The evening of the high school reunion arrived, and Ethan pulled up in front of the venue in a sleek black car. Dressed in a sharp suit that highlighted his now muscular frame, he stepped out with an air of confidence that immediately drew attention. People whispered as he walked in, unable to recognize the boy they once mocked. The reunion hall was buzzing with laughter and chatter. Olivia was among the crowd, though she wasn't her usual radiant self. Life hadn't been kind to her in recent years. After high school, her popularity faded, and she struggled to find her footing. Tonight, she had dressed to impress, hoping to recapture some of her former glory. Ethan scanned the room, his heart steady. He spotted familiar faces, some friendly, some not. He felt a surge of pride knowing he no longer sought their approval. He was here for himself, not for them. As the evening went on, Olivia approached Ethan, her smile hesitant. She barely recognized him, but once she did, her eyes widened in shock. Ethan, she asked, her voice uncertain. He nodded, his expression calm. Olivia, you've changed, she stammered, trying to mask her surprise. Ethan smiled slightly. I have Olivia tried to apologize for the prank she played years ago, stumbling over her words. Ethan listened, his face unreadable. When she finished, he took a moment before responding. I'm not here to relive the past, he said. What you did hurt me, but it also pushed me to become who I am today. So thank you for showing me what I never want to be. Olivia's face fell, her usual confidence replaced with regret. Ethan walked away, leaving her to reflect on the choices that had brought her to this moment. As the night progressed, someone brought up the infamous prank at the party. The room fell silent as all eyes turned to Ethan. He stood tall, his voice steady as he addressed the crowd. "Yes, that happened," he said, "and it was one of the worst nights of my life. But it was also the start of my journey to becoming stronger physically, mentally, and emotionally." Ethan shared a brief version of his story, focusing not on revenge but on resilience and growth. His words struck a chord with many in the room, inspiring those who had also faced challenges. The crowd erupted in applause, and Ethan felt a sense of closure. He had faced his past and emerged victorious, not by tearing others down, but by lifting himself up. The reunion marked a turning point for Olivia. Seeing Ethan's transformation and hearing his words forced her to confront her own shortcomings. She realized how shallow and hurtful she had been and began seeking ways to make amends, not just with Ethan, but with others she had wronged. Meanwhile, Ethan returned to his life with a renewed sense of purpose. He continued to thrive in the WWE, using his platform to share his story and advocate against bullying. Fans admired him not just for his skills in the ring, but for his humility and strength of character. One day, during a live interview, Ethan was asked about his high school experience and his encounter with Olivia at the reunion. "I forgave her," he said simply. "Not for her sake, but for mine. Carrying anger and resentment only holds you back. I chose to let it go and focus on my future." Ethan's journey continued to inspire millions. He received countless letters and messages from fans who saw themselves in his story. One letter in particular stood out, a heartfelt message from a young boy who had been bullied and was contemplating giving up. "Because of you, I believe I can make it through this," the boy wrote. Ethan framed the letter and placed it in his training room as a reminder of why he fought, not just in the ring, but in life. As for Olivia, she began volunteering at anti-bullying organizations, using her past mistakes as a way to teach others. Though her journey was just beginning, she found a sense of purpose in helping others avoid the pain she had once caused. Ethan's story became a testament to the power of resilience and redemption. He had risen from the ashes, proving that true strength comes not from revenge, but from rising above adversity. Ethan stood in a packed WWE arena, the championship belt in his hands. The crowd chanted his name as he raised the belt high, tears glistening in his eyes. This was more than a victory. It was the culmination of years of hard work, pain, and growth. As he looked into the roaring crowd, he thought of the boy he used to be, the one who sat alone in the cafeteria, dreaming of a better life. That boy had made it, and now he was unstoppable.